They cornered her in the hallway, taunting and laughing, convinced she was too soft, too quiet to ever fight back. But within seconds, the tables turned, and the very people who mocked her were on the floor, gasping, trembling, and begging for mercy. The shy girl they called Ghost had just reminded everyone why you never, ever underestimate someone who suffers in silence. This is the powerful story of Hana Kim. Hana had always walked through school as if she were invisible. Small-framed, soft-spoken, and always keeping her eyes on the ground, most students barely noticed her. She rarely spoke unless called upon in class, and even then, her voice was barely above a whisper. People called her the Shadow, Ghost Girl, and worse. Not out of hate, really, just ignorance. They assumed her silence meant weakness. What they didn't know was that Hana wasn't shy by nature. She was cautious. Her parents had moved to the U.S. from South Korea 3 years ago after her father passed away in a tragic accident. They relocated to give her a fresh start, but losing him had changed everything. He had been her protector, her biggest fan, and her martial arts instructor. Hana had trained under him since she was 6 years old, but after he died, she promised her mother she wouldn't fight anymore, not unless she had no choice. At her new school, that promise was tested almost daily. It started small, comments about her accent, snickers when she ate lunch alone, passive remarks that she was too quiet to be normal. Hana ignored them. She always did. But the bullies escalated when they realized she wouldn't defend herself. Or so they thought. There were 3 of them who made her life miserable. Rachel, the loudest of the 3, led the charge with her razor-sharp sarcasm. Then there was Zoe, who followed whatever Rachel said like a shadow, and Jake, who loved filming their cruelty to post on his private account for laughs. Every time they saw Hana, they found new ways to mess with her. Sometimes they tripped her in the hallway. Sometimes they took her books and tossed them into the trash. Other times, they'd throw balls at her during gym when the teacher wasn't looking. Hana never reacted. She endured it, remembering the promise to her mother. But pain has limits. It was the day of the school talent show that things finally spiraled. Hana had signed up weeks ago, not to perform, but to help with backstage lighting. She liked the quiet responsibility, the escape. But when Rachel found her backstage organizing cables, the plan to humiliate her went into motion. "Hey, Hana," Rachel said, grinning as Zoe and Jake followed behind her. "Didn't know ghosts could touch stuff." Hana didn't respond. She kept sorting wires. Rachel moved closer. "You know, I always wondered if you'd even scream if someone pushed you down the stairs." Jake laughed and lifted his phone, already recording. Zoe snatched the stage light remote from Hana's hand and dangled it above her head. "Come on, grab it," she teased. "Use your ninja powers." Hana stood still. Rachel shoved her shoulder. "What's wrong, Ghost Girl? Don't know how to fight?" That moment broke something. Not her calm, not her grace. But the final thread of tolerance that held back years of grief, silence, and strength that had nowhere else to go. She moved fast. With one sharp motion, Hana snatched the remote from Zoe's hand, stepped forward, and in the blink of an eye, disarmed Jake, knocking the phone from his grip. Before Rachel could react, Hana spun, landed a precise sweep that sent Rachel tumbling backward onto a pile of stage props. Jake charged at her from behind. Hana turned, twisted his arm behind his back in a controlled joint lock, and pinned him against the wall. Not hurting him, just showing control. Power. Silence. Zoe stumbled back, wide-eyed. What are you?" Hana looked at her. Someone who got tired of staying quiet. The entire auditorium had gone quiet. Students had gathered at the sound of the commotion. Some had caught the last few moments on their phones. Teachers rushed in seconds later to break up the scene, but they didn't have to. The bullies were already backed into a corner, shaking, shocked, and begging to be let go. Hana released Jake and stepped away. The teachers separated everyone and called in the assistant principal. Once the truth came out, along with the recordings on Jake's phone, things changed fast. The bullies were suspended for their ongoing harassment. Jake's parents were contacted after the videos surfaced, and he was banned from extracurriculars for the rest of the year. But Hana. She wasn't punished. Instead, she was asked if she'd like to speak to the school about bullying and standing up for yourself. At first, she hesitated. But when she saw the faces of other quiet students, those who had always sat alone in the cafeteria or flinched when the popular kids passed by, she agreed. A week later, she stood on the auditorium stage. The same stage where she'd been mocked. She shared her story, not just about the bullying, but about her father. How he taught her martial arts, not to fight, but to carry discipline, dignity, and protection. How she'd spent years holding everything in, afraid to break a promise, until the day her silence became surrender. And how she finally chose to stand up, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been pushed down. The auditorium erupted in applause. After that day, everything changed. Hana didn't suddenly become popular, and she didn't want to be. But people looked at her differently. With respect. Teachers nodded when she passed. Students who once ignored her started greeting her with quiet smiles. Even the library felt warmer. More importantly, Hana began teaching a free after-school self-defense class with the help of the gym coach. Dozens of students joined, boys and girls, loud and quiet, strong and unsure. She still wore her father's old martial arts bracelet on her wrist. A reminder of where she came from. Of what she carried. Of who she became. Because in a world that tried to shrink her, she didn't grow louder. She grew unshakable. And in the end, the ones who once mocked her were the ones left begging for mercy. Not because she wanted revenge, but because silence isn't weakness. Sometimes, it's just a storm waiting to rise.